There is a voice, a narrative that goes quietly and insistently, the world is falling apart. I'm sure you've come across it, you've heard it, and perhaps you've said it yourself. But there's another voice and narrative too. It's subtler, even quieter, and is perhaps hard to believe. It says the world is falling into place. These voices are, to me, echoing truths through our collective psyche, and they cause a tension, a pull to one pole or another. We tend to move mainly towards one pole, one position, and argue against the other. Or we find ourselves moving back and forth. In a real, true way, both voices are true, but their apparent contradiction, because surely they can't both be true at the same time, it's either one or the other, right? It reveals that we are in a transition, a true transition, and not just a symbolic one. And this transition is confusing, it's loud and messy to the point that it doesn't look or feel like one of progress and positivity at all. But if we look at the situation, at the whole picture with higher self, what can we see? And importantly, what can we do? This is the Higher Self Dialogues. I'm Anton Jarrod, and today I'm exploring the creation of a new world culture, which is not born through perfection, but through paradox, contrast, and sometimes destruction. Welcome and welcome back if you've been listening to previous episodes. In the first season of this new show, the Higher Self Dialogues, which is all about sharing the higher self perspective and story. We are all our higher selves. We are all expressions and forms of our higher selves. We all have a higher self, but of course, as part of this picture, we all have different degrees of knowledge, awareness, and experience of this. I have my experience of it, you have your experience of it. Today I'm recording from the house of a lovely friend in Hampshire. So I decided to open the door and let nature come in, so you'll hear the sounds of planes in the sky, birds, the breeze. A little bit of a background, and hopefully that adds something to the quality of this episode. It's all an experiment. Since about 2013, I decided to come out about my own spiritual experience and journey. And since then, I've been exploring and experimenting with different ways of expressing this, reaching out, connecting, teaching, trying to do all of that, and so on. And this podcast is the latest project in that endeavor, and I have no idea whether it will be a success or whether, like many of my experiments, it will simply fade and fizzle. I have no idea what will happen, and that's the nature of experiment, to work with such unknowns, and I know this all too well. But if this show is connecting with you in some way, then do let me know. Please share a review, share it with people you know, but also let me know your feedback and your comments, your criticisms and suggestions. They are all welcome. And I think it's a good point here just to say, when I say higher self and a higher perspective, I don't necessarily mean morally superior or better than someone else's perspective. I'm not trying to create a hierarchy. What I mean by higher is just a higher vantage point that with higher self, higher awareness, higher consciousness, you can see more. It's just about having more data in a way. And that's not necessarily better than anyone else's perspective, whether it has less data or not. All perspectives are valid. But the higher perspective offers something that is different and useful and interesting. And it's worth, I think, sharing. Now, to today's subject, our changing world and what it's signifying. Well, to me, the nuts and bolts of it is this: our whole planet and the planetary consciousness as a whole, of which we are a cell or a part, is undergoing a transformation to a higher state of consciousness and being. This is a well-known idea in modern spiritual circles and spiritual teachings, and yet even people who do understand it well are dismayed at what they observe. And all this can lead to all kinds of distortions of thought. In some ways, the dismay reveals that the understanding is actually not fully integrated. We have a cognitive bias towards thinking that destruction is bad, that it's morally wrong, or that something has gone wrong, when in fact it may well be that it is merely the precursor to a new emergence that we're witnessing, and a necessary one at that. The higher awareness allows one to see the multiplicity of and in truth, that multiple truths exist simultaneously. In this way, dissolution and destruction can be seen to exist with emergence and creation, just as each of these can be seen to be both good and bad in equally valid ways. The things that are destroying can be both good and bad at the same time, just as the new things emerging can also be so. The problem is not the multiple reality or the fact that reality has this quality, in my view, but the binary or limited thinking that can't hold multiple awarenesses at the same time. In many ways, we seek certainty and a purely rational or logical understanding in which things cannot be mutually inclusive. We try to force our minds to use and adopt a certain kind of logic, but the reality is often much wider than the field of vision that such a logic allows. Certainty and logic are not the deep grounds of spiritual understanding, but clarity through holistic multiplicity is. It's both and not either or. Okay, but how can we approach some of these huge challenges that we face today? I'm going to focus here on two that come to mind prominently: globalisation, one, and two, the development of AI, where that's going. With globalisation, I would not try to, and I don't deny, that it, having been driven by its handmaiden capitalism, that it's become an engine for exploitation, an engine of oppression and exertion of power and control over weaker entities, whether they're states or individuals, and that globalization has flattened and helped erase cultures. It's accelerated many forms of inequality and entrenched historical forms of them, and that it's been a factor in political disenfranchisement and disaffection, which we see today, huge social division and conflict, and that it has therefore been a factor in the global destabilization that we are currently seeing. And this is all undeniably, categorically the bad of globalization. At the same time, the shift towards globalization has created structures and processes that are helping and that will help a global world culture emerge, which is one that can and will support a living conscious connection and daily experiencing of higher self in the physical dimension. The higher self is usually something that is existing and manifesting purely in the spiritual domain, but for it to exist in the physical dimension in our daily consciousness, then it needs what we call a global civilization. It's its natural habitat. It's where it will emerge and thrive. The processes and structures of globalization that I'm talking about here are those of interconnectivity that cuts across geographical boundaries, the ability to move capital and power instantly anywhere in the world, and the establishment of global networks for the fulfillment of supply and demand, which facilitates the free movement of people, goods, and services around the globe. Now, all these things are fundamental to the world civilization of tomorrow that will, of necessity, be the fulfillment of the promise that we've had in our dreams for so long of a freer, egalitarian existence that is no longer a pipe dream. But yes, right now, because of the limited mentality of people, especially those with the power, capital, and control, and the primitivity of the structures and systems that we have in place right now, well, these things cause massive issues and painful side effects. But if they didn't exist, then they couldn't be developed or put to use by future generations towards better ends. And yes, unfortunately, although we do have the tools today and we have access to the knowledge and wisdom that can get rid of these side effects, the likelihood is that, in fact, it will only be future generations that will be able to realize the benefits of globalization. And I think that's, just because of evolution. It takes time. And it's because, they will be able to learn from the mistakes of today. And, unfortunately, we have to suffer the consequences of them. With AI, the challenges that it will create are actually already being seen. It presents some unique risks to jobs and labor markets, to our culture, to creativity, to ethics, and in some ways to survival, especially as regards the extent to which AI becomes weaponized by unscrupulous human actors. We're already seeing this. I'm sure perhaps some of you heard about the deep fake voice of the US chief of staff, and how just goes to signal, I think, some of the kinds of disruption that were just science fiction a few years ago. So there are undoubtedly huge risks and challenges, but at the same time, can't just say that, okay, AI is evil and that it's totally a bad thing, because AI has the power as well and potential to solve humanity's most intractable problems, to help organize and administer the systems and processes that an evolving world civilization needs. It can help create the conditions for global unity and fraternity, where and when it is deployed by and with wisdom humaneness and the highest ethical standards, of course. That future world civilization I was talking about, it will need to use AI to create and maintain the preconditions and conditions for global peace, security, and economic well-being for all citizens, which are the only conditions in which the higher self can flourish and where a unified global consciousness can actually establish itself. AI can help free humanity up in terms of allowing it to have more time, allowing it to connect with and evolve its connection with higher self in the physical world. And thus, it can support the universal evolutionary processes which all living entities are a part of. This whole grand scheme of spiritual evolution, which is at the heart of so many spiritual teachings. In the meantime, though, yes, the dark side of its development will no doubt show itself first, and that's, I think, what we're seeing. But why is it like that? Why can't we just get it right straight away? And moreover, surely things would be better if we did. But I think a quiet delusion creeps in here, which suggests that things could have been better or that could have been different and right immediately, as if perfection is something that can just be installed and downloaded like a computer update. But I think this forgets and fails to see that perfection is an emergent property and state. And yeah, it's earned through and arises through friction and becoming. It doesn't arrive fully formed. And reality doesn't work like that. A tree can't bear fruit until it's mature, just as a human can't show wisdom before it's, at least grown up a little bit and learned language. And this isn't a sign of failure just because it isn't perfect. It's not an evil that things are imperfect at first, but that's what we are thinking. Often we look at globalisation, at AI developments, and we think, this is evil, this is wrong, this is something that needs to be stopped. But actually, the call, I think, is not to see it as an evil to be stopped, but as a potential good that needs to be developed. What we see as evil in the world may not be the moral failure that we think it is, but a stage towards the good. An unpleasant, less than ideal good, but still important, still important functional step towards something better. So what does this call for then? Does it mean that we should just accept every innovation, no matter the consequences, just let it proliferate because it might be the good that might lead somewhere? Well, no. I think the call is not for just total compliance, complicity, and acquiescence. I think the call is toward trying to embrace and bring forth a higher mind and perspective with an eye to leading towards the future that surely all or many human beings want, rather than simply following where technological and social change is taking us. And this means, I think, having higher, more advanced conversations about where we are going, quo vadis, and what kind of life do we want, and who are we anyway? It requires people of wisdom and love to keep stepping forward, to make such calls, to be a voice in the chorus that is present. We need to keep upholding the vision of a better world, critiquing both the doomsdayers and the idealists. There is a call for, and the possibility of, a globalisation that doesn't oppress, that paves the way for a future form of international collaboration and unity that we don't yet see, but which is based on great tolerance and the promotion of human dignity. There is a call for a possibility of and a form of AI that doesn't obliterate economies and cause mass suffering in order to serve and enrich the few, but that will free us all to work less and enjoy life more, and for those that are interested to unlock their spiritual consciousness and evolve towards higher dimensions. And there is a call for brave, wise, loving people to help integrate the contrasts and the divides, the apparent paradoxes and contradictions, and the polarities. We are a world in flux, in which the old and new things are dying and emerging, and there are evils and good connected to both of these. And we have to discern what must be kept and what must be let go of. So how does this all land with you? Does it speak to a rhythm you move to, or a deeper logic that makes sense to your mind? Or perhaps you feel it can't be seen this way, but maybe another way makes more sense for you. Well, whatever you feel, I hope that this has at least given you some food for thought. And please remember to review and share this episode if you feel others would benefit from hearing it. In the meantime, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode in about a week's time. That's all from me. Bye for now.